Hey, this is Heather from Yellow Ribbon Crafts, and I want to show you the secret to keeping your stitches from twisting. So first I'm going to show you a project that I worked on when well, it was my first knit project, I think. This is the back. And does everything look normal? This is the front. Now can you see big difference between the bottom, which is the same as what I showed you on the back, and the top? The bottom, every other row is twisted. So maybe if I pull them a little bit, you can see here's a twisted row, here's a normal row, twisted row, normal row. And then the moment when I realized, oh, I'm making a mistake, or I'm not doing things exactly the way they're supposed to be, is right about here. So from here up, nice flat stitches, from here down, twisted stitches. And I'll show you what I discovered, and hopefully it'll help you out. So I was making my purls coming from the front to the back, and then taking my yarn and wrapping it from the bottom to the top and pulling it through. And I don't know why it should matter. It's making a stitch. What does it matter? Well, it kind of does. The typical way that you're supposed to make a purl is from the top to the bottom. Now I'm not showing you this so that you can change the way you purl. I'm just showing it to you. Here's the way I do it, so that you know that there's a difference. Okay, and actually I don't purl like that anymore. Now I hold the yarn in my left hand. So I'm going to finish the rest of these stitches the way I normally do. And see how the difference is that when I pull the stitch through, the yarn that's going to my left hand is at the top. I could adjust and pull it like this, and then the yarn that's going to my left hand is at the bottom of the needle, but that just does not feel right to me. This feels natural to me, and that's the way I want to do it. So instead of changing the way I purl, I decided to change the way I look at the yarn and the way I approach the yarn. All right, so if you're like me and you don't want to change the way you're purling or the way you're knitting, maybe your stitches are seated differently when you knit instead of when you purl. For me, it's purling. Just adjust as you knit through the stitches. So I'll show you what I mean. Right here, the yarn's coming from the right. So I want to make sure that that yarn stays on the right side of my needle as I insert the needle into my work. And then I'll make my knit stitch. Let's take a look at the next stitch now. This one again is coming from the right hand side and up the back. So let's make sure that that yarn that's on the back is going to be on the right hand side of the needle when I make this next stitch. This one's the same, and this one is different. Do you see what's different? The yarn comes from the right and goes up the front instead of going up the back. This is the way stitches are supposed to be seated on your needles. I don't believe that's right. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. It is whatever way you're comfortable with, just as long as you realize that everybody who's writing directions for knitting is assuming that this is the way that your stitch is sitting on that needle. If it's not and it's sitting a different way, just adjust. But understand that they are all assuming that the stitch is sitting on your needle this way. So when you come across this stitch, you make sure that the right hand side that came in from the right is on the right hand part of your needle when you insert the needle and knit it. This one's the same. This is the normal or proper seated stitch. The yarn's coming in from the right and it goes in front of the needle and then down the back. So we're just going to move our needle in, keeping that yarn that's coming from the right on the right hand side of the needle. Okay, let's go back to a couple stitches where it's seated wonky. The way I purl, this is how my stitches get seated. The yarn that comes in from the right goes to the back of the stitch. So I'm inserting my needle. If I insert my needle the way most instructions will tell me, so that the front of the stitch I insert my needle to the left of the front part of the stitch, look what happens. It gets twisted. See the twist? That is not what we want. We want to insert our needle into the stitch so that the yarn that comes from the right hand side stays on the right hand side of our needle. This yarn that's on the left is going to go off towards the left hand part. Sometimes they say knit through back loop in the pattern. Well, if I knit through the back loop, I'm making a perfectly normal stitch. That's not what the pattern wants. The pattern wants the stitch to be seated like this, then you knit through the back loop. Here, let me do it. And the stitch ends up twisted. That's what they want. They want a twisted stitch. But instead of saying that, they say knit through back loop. So if your stitches are seated like this and it says knit through back loop, well, you better adjust it. You better slip it, put it back in the position that everybody wants it to be in, and then knit through the back loop. So I told you I would show you how to avoid twisted stitches, but I guess I showed you how to make a twisted stitch too. It's all about how your stitches are seated on your needles. So I'll just finish up here. Yarn's coming from the right up the back, so I'm going to put that onto the right hand part of my needle and knit it. Yarn again is coming from the right to the back, so that is the part that's going to the right hand part of my needle, and I knit it. Here's one that is seated the way the directions are expecting it to be. Yarn comes from the right but goes up the front of the needle, and that's the part I want towards the right hand part of my needle when I insert it and knit it. All right, oh, here's two that are my way towards the back, so the backhand part of that stitch is going to go towards the right hand part of the needle and knit it. There we go. So hopefully that helps you and you don't spend all of one side and half of the other before you figure out how to make it so that your stitches are all nice and laying flat and not half twisted.